Graffiti walls, cracked sidewalks, and the heavy boom of drums echoing through the night. The air smells of smoke, cheap liquor, and ambition. In that chaos, a legend was born. His name was Old Dirty Bastard. When the Wu-Tang Clan exploded onto the scene in 1993, it wasn't just music, it was a movement. RZA, the mastermind. GZA, the philosopher. Method Man, the superstar. Ghostface, the soul. Raekwon, the storyteller. And right in the middle of all that genius stood a man no one could predict, contain, or ever forget. ODB. He didn't just rap, he lived his verses. He screamed them, laughed through them, cried in them. He was chaos with rhythm, a broken mirror reflecting truth, madness, and brilliance all at once. With his gold teeth flashing, hair wild, and one lens missing from his glasses, ODB walked on stage like a man who owned the world and might just burn it down for fun. Behind the madness was pain. Behind the laughter, a deep sadness. He grew up poor in Brooklyn, raised on gospel, rhythm, and raw survival. He wanted freedom, not fame. And in chasing it, he gave hip-hop something it had never seen before: pure, unfiltered honesty. One day, he pulled a child from beneath a burning car. The next, he stood on the Grammy stage in a brand new suit, shouting words that still echo decades later. Wu-Tang is for the children. Old Dirty Bastard was never just a rapper. He was a revelation, a storm, a reminder that genius and madness often share the same heartbeat. From the streets of Brooklyn, to the blinding lights of the Grammys, to a mysterious death that still haunts hip-hop. This is the story of Old Dirty Bastard, the wild heart of Wu-Tang Clan. Before he became Old Dirty Bastard, before the chaos, the fame, the madness, he was simply Russell Tyrone Jones. Born the 15th of November 1968, in the heart of Brooklyn, New York. He was one of 6 children in a small, crowded apartment, raised by Cherry and William Jones, a working-class couple trying to keep their kids safe in a city that never slept. His mother worked as a police dispatcher. His father drove for the New York Transit Authority. There was structure in their lives, but not much peace. Russell was different from the start. He hated rules, hated being told what to do. He'd show up to school late, if at all wild hair, mismatched clothes, a grin that said, "I don't care." His mother nicknamed him Rusty because, as she said, he was always dirty. He didn't care about being clean, only about feeling free. But inside that restless boy burned a gift: music. His mother sang in church and played instruments. His older brother Ramsey was a drummer, a real one, playing gigs in local clubs. The Jones family didn't have much, but they had rhythm. Music poured through the walls of that Brooklyn home like water through cracks. By age 11, Russell was already performing, lying about his age just to get on stage. A local label even offered him a record deal, but his mother turned it down. "He's too young," she said. She wanted him in school. He wanted to be on stage. That moment became the first spark of rebellion, the moment when Rusty began turning into ODB. When his parents divorced, everything changed. The home broke apart, and Russell's world started spinning faster. He turned to the streets, to the sound of hip-hop, which was just being born in the late 70s. He loved the rhythm, the rawness, the honesty, and soon, he was living it. He started breakdancing, beatboxing, and battling kids in the neighborhood for bragging rights. It wasn't long before family re-entered the picture, not his parents this time, but his 2 cousins, Robert Diggs, later known as RZA, and Gary Grice, later known as GZA. The 3 were inseparable. They called themselves the All In Together Now crew. They made homemade beats on cassette decks, recorded raps in basements, and dreamed of changing the world. They were young, hungry, and fearless. They studied 5% Nation philosophy, soaked up the wisdom of their older cousin Papa Wu, and filled their minds with spiritual codes, mathematics, and street lessons. That knowledge became their armor and their weapon. ODB would later lace his verses with that wisdom, hidden beneath his humor and wild energy. But even in those early years, he was unpredictable. He'd freestyle with intensity 1 minute, then burst out laughing, jump off stage, or start dancing mid-rhyme. He wasn't like anyone else, and he didn't want to be. While RZA and GZA focused on perfecting their craft, Russell wanted to feel it to make hip-hop dangerous again. By the mid-1980 seconds, the trio was gaining local buzz, performing anywhere that had a microphone. They dreamed of signing to a label, of bringing Brooklyn's raw energy to the world. But life had other plans. GZA and RZA would both get early record deals, and both would get burned by the system. And ODB, left watching it all from the sidelines, began to understand one brutal truth. The music business wasn't built for black men like him, not ones who refused to play by the rules. It was in that rejection, in that anger, that Old Dirty Bastard was truly born. The name came from an old kung fu film, but the spirit came from the streets. There's no father to his style. Russell Jones was no longer just a kid from Brooklyn. He was a voice of rebellion, a mirror of chaos, a soul that refused to be tamed. By the late 1980 seconds, New York City was a battleground of beats and concrete. Crack smoke drifted through the streets like a ghost. Boom boxes blasted Run D, MC, Eric B., and Rakim, and Public Enemy. In that chaos, three cousins from Brooklyn and Staten Island were quietly sharpening their swords. RZA, Jeezy, and Russell Jones, now calling himself Old Dirty Bastard, were ready to build something the world had never seen. They had already tried the system. RZA had signed with Tommy Boy Records under the name Prince Rakeem. Jeezy had inked a deal with Cold Chillin' Records. Both were chewed up and spit out by the industry. They'd seen the contracts, the lies, the gatekeepers. So when RZA came back home to Brooklyn, he had a new plan, one that would change hip-hop forever. He told ODB and Jeezy, "We're gonna form a group. 9 generals, 9 swords, 1 sound. They called it Wu-Tang Clan. Inspired by the Shaolin Kung Fu films, they watched endlessly movies where warriors fought for honor, for freedom, for survival. That's what Wu-Tang was. Hip-hop as a martial art. Every verse was a blade, every MC a fighter. The original lineup was massive: RZA, Jeezy, Method Man, Raekwon, Ghostface Killah, Inspector Deck, U-God, Master Killa, and Old Dirty Bastard, the wildest of them all. If RZA was the brain, and Jeezy was the wisdom, ODB was the soul, raw, unpredictable, and electrifying. When they hit the studio, the energy was chaos and brilliance colliding. They recorded a song called Protect Ya Neck. Grimy, unapologetic, and nothing like what the radio wanted. They sold it out of car trunks and local record shops. And just like that, the underground caught fire. Brooklyn loved it. Staten Island, Shaolin, as they called it, loved it. New York City was buzzing. Steve Rifkind, head of Loud Records, saw their homemade video for Protect Ya Neck on a local TV show and couldn't believe what he was seeing. 9 rappers? No manager? No stylist? No rules? It was madness, but it was real. He signed them, but under one condition from RZA. Each member would be free to sign solo deals with other labels. It was revolutionary. No one had ever done that before. Wu-Tang wasn't just a rap group, it was an empire. And in November 1993, the world met the army of Shaolin through their debut album. Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers. It sounded like nothing else. Dirty drums, dusty samples, screaming kung fu movie clips, and in the middle of it all, the wild, magnetic voice of Old Dirty Bastard. He didn't rap like anyone else. He sang off-key, yelled, whispered, and laughed through his verses. He was part preacher, part drunk uncle, part prophet. On tracks like Shame on a Nigga and Protect Ya Neck, he was pure energy, unpredictable and alive. The world had never seen anything like him. The album exploded. Critics called it revolutionary. Fans called it real. It went platinum, redefining East Coast hip-hop and bringing the underground back to life. The Wu was more than music. It was a philosophy. It was knowledge, struggle, and survival turned into art. Their symbol, that sharp golden W, became a badge of power for kids from every block. And in the center of it all stood ODB, half genius, half chaos, the voice of rebellion in a world that wanted control. The fame came fast, and so did the trouble. ODB's unpredictable behavior made him both beloved and feared. He'd storm stages, steal microphones mid-performance, laugh in the face of authority. He wasn't acting, that was him. A man too raw for the system he'd just helped change. But for that brief, shining moment, 1993 to 1995, the world was his stage. Wu-Tang ruled the airwaves. The East Coast had risen again, and the name Old Dirty Bastard became legend. He was the heart of the storm, and the storm was just beginning. Fame hit Old Dirty Bastard like a bomb. One day, he was the loudest voice in a dusty Staten Island studio. The next, he was a platinum-selling star with a Grammy nod and chaos in his eyes. When Wu-Tang exploded, labels fought to sign the wildest of them all. ODB joined Elektra Records, and in 1995, dropped a masterpiece of madness, Return to the 36 chambers, the dirty version. The cover? His food stamp card. The message? I came from nothing, and I'm still real. Brooklyn Zoo. Shimmy, shimmy, ya. No polish, no filter. Just raw, beautiful chaos. ODB didn't rap, he erupted. The album went platinum. The man became legend. But fame was gasoline to his fire. He'd crash stages, snatch microphones, start fights and laugh while doing it. He was unpredictable, untamed, and unstoppable. Then came Mariah Carey's call. She wanted him for her fantasy remix. He showed up drunk, 3 hours late, demanded champagne and cash, then recorded the most iconic verse of her career. Me and Mariah go back like babies and pacifiers. It was chaos. It was magic. It was ODB. Soon, his name was everywhere for all the wrong reasons. Arrests, drug rumors, paranoia. He started talking about government plots, FBI agents, secret plans to silence rappers. People laughed. But behind those wild eyes, ODB was spiraling. Then came the Grammys. Wu-Tang lost. ODB stormed the stage and shouted, "Wu-Tang is for the children. Puffy is good, but Wu-Tang is the best." The crowd gasped. The cameras rolled. And a legend was born, part hero, part madman. What they didn't know? Just one day before that outburst, he'd pulled a 4-year-old girl from under a burning car. That was ODB, unpredictable, wild, and human. A man who could save a life one day and set the world on fire the next. He was a storm, brilliant, broken, unforgettable. And every storm eventually runs out of rain. By the late 90 seconds, Old Dirty Bastard was no longer just a rapper, he was a headline. Every stage crash, every mugshot, every outburst became front-page news. And behind the chaos, a man was breaking apart. Fame had turned into surveillance. ODB told interviewers that the FBI was watching him, that they wanted to erase rappers who spoke the truth just like Tupac and Biggie. Most people laughed, but the fear in his eyes said otherwise. In reality, the system was watching. By 1998, he'd been arrested multiple times for assault, for drugs, for wearing a bulletproof vest as a convicted felon. He'd been shot during a robbery in Brooklyn, drove himself to the hospital, then walked out before the doctors could treat him. He was running from everyone, the police, the labels, and maybe himself. When he was pulled over in 1999, police found 20 bags of crack cocaine in his car. That was the moment everything changed. No more music, no more freedom. They sentenced him to 2 to 4 years in prison. For ODB, it was the beginning of the end. In prison, the madness turned to silence. He was locked inside Clinton Correctional, a maximum security facility filled with killers and gangsters. He told family members that his life was in danger every day. He said guards beat him, inmates threatened him, and someone wanted him dead. He started taking medication just to survive, to stop the voices, to stop the fear. He called home and told his mother, "They're trying to put something inside me." His mentor, Papa Wu, claimed the system was trying to implant a chip in his body. Whether real or imagined, paranoia was all he had left. By the time he got out in 2003, the world had moved on. Wu-Tang was fractured, and Dirty was lost. But Dame Dash and Rockefeller Records gave him one last chance, a $1 million deal, a promise of redemption. VH1 followed him with cameras for a documentary called Inside Out, ODB on parole. The footage was haunting. He laughed, joked, rapped. But there was something hollow behind his eyes, like a man standing at the edge of something he couldn't name. He said the hardest part about freedom was staying away from drugs because life without them is just too boring. He was trying to rebuild. He performed again with Wu-Tang at Rock the Bells. He smiled on stage, screamed his famous growl, and disappeared backstage like a ghost. Friends said he wasn't the same, quieter, slower, disconnected. Then came the 13th of November, 2004, 2 days before his 36th birthday. ODB was in the studio with RZA, working on new music. He complained about chest pains, said his heart was racing. Moments later, he collapsed. When paramedics arrived, he was already gone. The cause? An accidental overdose of cocaine and tramadol. He died with a faint smile on his face. For the world, it was shocking. For those close to him, it wasn't. They'd watched the light fade for years. His mother said, "He wasn't crazy, he was misunderstood." His wife said his last wish was simple: "Make sure I get what's mine." Even in death, his estate became a war, royalties, rights, and the fight for his legacy. But legends never really die. Today, ODB lives in every wild verse, every broken rhythm, every artist who refuses to play by the rules. He was chaos and genius in one body, the sound of a man who could never be caged. Old Dirty Bastard was more than his madness. He was truth unfiltered, untamed, unforgettable. Even after his death, Old Dirty Bastard refused to fade away. You can still feel him in the bass lines, in the chaos, in the way a rapper dares to break the rules. ODB wasn't just part of hip-hop. He was hip-hop raw, unpredictable, and alive. He left behind no perfect image, no polished legacy. What he left was truth, and truth is never pretty. In an era when the industry demanded perfection, he gave them imperfection. When they wanted silence, he gave them madness. When they wanted a product, he gave them a soul. That's why his name still echoes through artists who color outside the lines, who rap offbeat, who live on their own terms. He paved the way for every eccentric, every misfit, every rebel with a mic. Without ODB, there would be no Young Thug, no Tyler, no Kanye as we know them. He taught the world that genius doesn't come with polish, it comes with pain. His son, Young Dirty Bastard, carries that fire, now performing his father's songs on tour, keeping the madness sacred. RZA still calls him the spirit of freedom in its purest form. And maybe that's what ODB always was, freedom personified. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a saint. He was the voice of every broken dreamer who refused to bow down. The man who stood on a Grammy stage and shouted, "Wu-Tang is for the children." That was never just a line. It was a prophecy, because decades later, the children are still listening. They study his verses, his interviews, his laughter, trying to understand a man who could make you laugh, cry, and question everything in the same breath. Old Dirty Bastard didn't die in that studio. He just transformed into myth, into music, into memory. His story reminds us that even in chaos, there's beauty. Even in madness, there's meaning. Because dignity doesn't need applause, and real art, the kind that shakes your soul, never dies. Rest in power, Old Dirty Bastard. The world wasn't ready for you, but hip-hop will never forget you.